Arkansas Farm Bureau, give a warm Farm Bureau welcome to our Governor, Asa Hutchinson.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It is a delight to be here, and all I can say is it's good to have a birthday, and I'm grateful that you didn't sing to me. I'm sure it'd been great, but I woke up this morning and Tommy and Dave Basil and those on the buzz called me and sang happy birthday to me. My wife heard that and she says, man, they're drinking awful early in the morning. And I'm glad that you also mentioned my grandchildren. I guess if you're 65, you can actually talk about your grandchildren. So I've got a grandson who's Asa the Fourth. We call him A4. He's 6'5", and he plays basketball for Bentonville in the 10th grade, and he plays with Malik Monk, who's got one of the top 5 recruits in the country. Malik Monk scored 46 points last Friday night, and I'll just say that my grandson, in the traditional Hutchinson fashion, had more fouls than points. Very proud of him. What a great time it is to be able to see him and all of my grandchildren. It's a pleasure to be here to welcome farmers, ranchers, and agricultural leaders from across the state to Little Rock for your 81st annual convention. I'm grateful for the leadership that Arkansas Farm Bureau plays in Arkansas agriculture. I'm delighted to have Robert Morey here, who was on my campaign but is my agricultural liaison. I got him off the tractor. He worked for Senator Bozeman, is doing a great job for me. Robert, where are you? So that way you can catch him if you can't catch me. I also wanted to recognize Secretary Wes Ward. I think he's doing a good job as our Secretary of Agriculture. Wes, thank you for your leadership. And in Arkansas, as you know, farming is not just our largest industry, but it is truly who we are. It is a part of who we are as a state. It helps define us. Farms span across 13.8 million acres of Arkansas land, accounting for 1 out of every 6 jobs. Amazingly, we rank among the top 25 states in the production of 23 different agricultural commodities, generating $20 billion for our state economy. Thanks for what you do. We are all impacted by agriculture. Arkansas is home to nearly 45,000 farms. Some 97% of these farms are family-owned. And it's a part of my history, it's a part of who I am as a person, the fact that my dad was a farmer. The fact that I had my young years on the farm, if anything, it taught me work, it taught me discipline, it taught me a responsibility. Farm life is good life, even with the risk that it carries with it. And as governor, it was not a difficult call because agriculture is our #1 industry, and if I want to grow our economy, we need to keep agricultural strong in this state. And it was for that reason that I was able to give, after the legislative session was over and after the budget was passed, we recognized that we did not give sufficient funding for the Division of Agriculture at the University of Arkansas. And so I allocated $3 million of rainy day funds for the extension and research services at the University Division of Agriculture. And I want to give credit to the Speaker of the House and the Senate Pro Tem, Jonathan Dismang and Jeremy Gillum, for their urging of that and their support of that effort to make sure that agriculture was adequately funded. It was a team effort. And then we also, our county fairs, in my judgment, are important to agriculture in this state. And it was for that reason that whenever we didn't get sufficient funding for our county fairs, I allocated $840,000 to get out immediately to our county fairs to make sure they're strong and they have the funding for the coming years. Our county fairs are important as well. But not only supporting agriculture in terms of research, in terms of extension, I also recognize that because we're such great producers in Arkansas, our farmers, that we need to expand our markets globally. And if there's one thing I need to do as governor, and that is to market the state of Arkansas, including its agriculture, abroad. And I might go to Europe, as I did for the Paris Air Show and for a steel show in Germany, but let me tell you, everywhere I go, I talk about Arkansas agriculture. And then I went specifically to Cuba, as Randy mentioned, because Cuba is a market of 11 million people that needs to be open to our rice, our poultry, and our pork products in that country. And so I went there and I urged not a full lifting of the embargo, which many of you very well might support, but let's take it a step at a time if necessary, and the first step that needs to be taken is that we lift the credit restriction on agricultural products so we can negotiate fair sales to Cuba, just like Brazil, Thailand, and Vietnam is doing. And so after I left Cuba, I followed up with a letter to the new Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, who I served with, and I said, "Dear Speaker, let's move Senator Bozeman's legislation forward, Congressman Crawford's legislation forward, that would open up credit transaction for agricultural sales to Cuba. Let's get that bill passed, open up that market, and hopefully Cuba will respond with a greater enhancement of freedoms, with a greater recognition of the free market system." And I'll mention in just a minute that I not only went to Cuba, but I went to China. And you go to those two different countries, and you go to Vietnam, and you're talking to communist leaders in all three countries. But in Cuba, it's different because they have not let go of the, as they would say, the principles of the revolution yet. And they still talk about a centralized economy in that country. And I tell one story to illustrate the point, because I raised this issue with the Cuban leaders, and they respond saying, "We're making progress, but we're doing it at our own pace." And they tell the story of the restaurants, where all the restaurants in Cuba are government-owned, centralized government-owned and controlled. And many of the individuals there said, "We ought to operate our own family restaurant. Give us a license so that we can have a restaurant." And they said, finally, "Okay, we will do that, but we're going to limit you to 50 customers. And of course, they're entrepreneurs, so they said, "Okay, we'll take that." And pretty soon, the husband had a license for 50, and the wife had a license for 50, and the cook back in the back had a license for 50. Entrepreneurs will get the job done. And then the government tells me that soon they realized that the family-owned businesses were competing with each other so that they could provide better food and better service so that they could have more customers. Guess what? That's the free market system at work. And then they realized that their government-owned restaurants were having a hard time competing with the service and the quality of food offered in the private sector restaurants. They're learning, they're getting it, but it's slow moving. And so hopefully they will taste the free market system, they will taste what capitalism can do for that country and put cash in their citizens' pocket that can buy our agricultural products that we need to sell. And so it is important that we change our policies with Cuba. That was one of the messages that I had, and as the first governor to go to Cuba after the restoration of diplomatic relations with that country, it was an important message to put Arkansas in the first tier of states to do business with Cuba as the market opens. It's a great future opportunity for us. Now, because I don't want you to think I'm really a 65-year-old governor, I do play pickup basketball. And so my staff knew that I like to play a little basketball, and so they said, "Well, Governor, we're going to put together a game for you in Cuba." I said, "Fine, that's terrific, that sounds fun." So you get your old gym shorts, you get a raggedy t-shirt, and you go out there to play a little pickup basketball. I knew it was in trouble, I was in trouble, whenever they pulled me up to the Cuban National Sports Arena. And in the sports arena, as I went in, you had the Cuban national team dressed out in uniform on both ends of the court. 6'5" to 6'8", and I said, this doesn't look good. They had referees there, they had all the press there, the Cuban press, Reuters, and I said, it's too late to back out. So I get there, and it's me and Mike Preston, my head of economic development. We're the two gringos with 3 Cubans playing against 5 Cubans. We bring the ball down, they pass it to me, I turn toward the basket, and all the Cuban defenders back up. And I say, isn't it great to be governor of Arkansas? I had to call a timeout. I said, let's play ball. You don't have to pass me the ball every time. We had some fun, though, and it's a good way to build relationships with that country. And so we expand our global markets there. I also went to China. And in China, again, their capitalism, despite having a centralized controlled government, is just going out of sight. They're growing at a fast economic rate. Their industry, their manufacturing, their food processing is automated. It is state-of-the-art. And they understand, as you talk to the leadership there, investment. They have sovereign wealth funds that they're looking for investment in a secure market in the United States. And we welcome those. They tell us where good places to invest in Arkansas. Where can we invest? They're looking for those global opportunities. I'm there to say Arkansas is a good place to invest. But it's also about agriculture there. And so we have Tyson's Foods there that's invested in Henan province in 3 different plants, showing them that we can produce poultry there in China and jobs, market the poultry there. But we also want to open up their markets, that huge consumer market, to all of our agricultural products. And that's a little bit more complicated because they obviously want into our market as well. And they have issues with our biosecurity. I invite them to come here to see our biosecurity, how confident they can be in that, lift the restrictions, let us market to China. And so we have that message as we go into a large country like China. And by the way, it makes a difference when a governor shows up. In Cuba, they still have the restriction on our poultry because of the one avian flu breakout in Boone County that Bruce Holland, is that you, Bruce, there? I want to recognize Bruce Holland, who's doing an incredible job as director of our livestock and poultry and containing that and demonstrating to the world that our products are safe. I made that case to the Cuban agricultural officials, and they still had their prohibition on our poultry. 1 week after I returned, after I raised the issue, they lifted the restriction. And so sometimes a governor can make a difference in raising those issues overseas. In China, though, I also want to remark that we did come back with a letter of intent with Sun Paper Company, one of the largest paper producers, and I went through their plant, highly automated, incredible story, and they're looking for investment in Arkansas. We pointed them to Arkansas because they're out of raw material. We've got millions of acres of timberland. We've got our timber producers that are ready to produce, ready to market their product. And so they would set up a fluff mill processing timber in South Arkansas, in which they would send the fluff mill back to China for further processing. So it's a win-win for us. It would be a $1.3 billion investment. It is only a letter of intent, but it is an indication that they will look at Arkansas exclusively. There's a specific time frame for them to select a site, hire the consultants, negotiate the incentives, and let me tell you, it would help us change the economy in South Arkansas. It'd be a great boost for us if we can get that in. And so we did work expanding our global markets, but let me come back to something that's important to Arkansas agriculture and our families, and that is simply the strength of our rural communities. And as governor, education is important, and the strength of our schools in our local communities is important for our farm families. And it was for that reason I supported, I advocated for, and I signed into law Act 377 that allows an appeal or a waiver to be given to an academically performing school that is financially sound, and they can't be automatically closed just because they don't reach the magic mark of 350 students. Good schools ought to be encouraged. They ought to have an opportunity to make their case that they have the support that's needed, and they ought to be able to continue to survive. Job skill training is important for our local communities in partnership in their high schools and their two-year colleges so that we can produce the welders and the electricians that we need in our industry and to recruit the industry for our rural communities. And that's exciting to me. That's the reason I personally lead our workforce cabinet, where we meet regularly and saying, let's break down the silos, let's make sure the funds go where they need to go, that we can have the trained and skilled workforce that we need for industry. And part of that effort in skill training is my emphasis on computer coding. And whenever we pass the mandate as the first state in the nation that we're going to require computer science or computer coding to be taught in every high school in Arkansas, I was mindful of our rural communities and said we need to make sure that they can offer it free of charge and have access to distance learning free of charge for computer coding in their high school. And as a result, we have been called the leading state in computer science education by Wired magazine, by CNBC. We get asked the question, why is Arkansas leading? We exceeded the expectations of the number of students enrolled, with over 3,900 students enrolled in computer science classes for the first time. Great opportunity to change our economy. I was in Charleston, Arkansas, great farming community. And in Charleston, Arkansas, we dedicated the Maggie House this week, a new home for foster children. And Jeff Stubblefield, the superintendent of the Charleston schools, introduced me, just like Randy introduced me. He introduced me to the audience at the Maggie House, and as I came up and we passed, I whispered in his ear, "Superintendent, how's your computer science classes going?" And it was just a moment, and he smiled and he said, "We have 20 students enrolled in Charlton High School." And so it's for our rural communities. It gives us opportunities in agriculture and to strengthen and build the communities that are so important to us. I never forget going to Magnus, Arkansas, population 200. And in Magnus, Arkansas, we dedicated a feed mill. And in Magnus, Arkansas, the mayor was there, but we had the United States Senator, the governor was there, the United States Congressman, all of the local officials, everybody was there, and the mayor simply stood up and he said, "I've only been mayor 6 months, but look at all these power folks that I brought here to this community." It was the best and shortest speeches. He took credit for it. But it can happen. Growth and economic stimulus can happen in small towns as well. We have some challenges over the next few months. Just let me tell you some of the things that we're working on. We're working on a new highway funding formula. And it's going to be challenging for us because everybody knows we need new and better highways in Arkansas to stimulate growth, to make sure we have access from our farms to our markets, and we need highway funding. But guess what? Nobody wants to pay for it. And so we're going to be looking at a new formula. I want you to be open-minded on it, but as we consider new funding options for our highways, I'm thinking about that farmer. I'm thinking about that person who is living in a rural community that might work on the farm and drive to the factory, and that first time in a long time they've got a little cash dividend because the gas prices are down. We want to be careful not to take that away. And so we're mindful of that farmer as we develop that policy. We're working on Medicaid reform. We're expecting a report from the Legislative Task Force soon that's going to pave the way for how we're going to take care of 250,000 Arkansans that are working, that are struggling in life to get ahead, but for the first time they have access to health care. And we hope to convert the private option to a new program that is called Arkansas Works, where we have incentives to work so that our social programs in this state are incentives for people to go to work versus incentives for people not to work. A fundamental principle. That should guide us in every social program. That one simple question, we're trying to put those principles to work. It should encourage employer-sponsored insurance rather than government-sponsored insurance. It should encourage greater integrity of our system of providing a safety net for our citizens. These are some of the things that we're working on. Finally, I want to express thanks to our Farm Bureau for their work and leadership in passing legislation that would license our grain dealers and provide some integrity for that program that helps our farmers and is so critical to them. Balancing the need for not too much government control, but also protection of our farmers. You provided leadership in that, and I'm grateful to you. One final thing, I see Becky Keogh here, my Director of Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, and I appreciate her leadership and the Attorney General's leadership, Leslie Rutledge, in fighting intrusive EPA regulations, such as Waters of the United States, that regulates farm ponds and small tributaries that should not be subject to federal government control. And they have my support in fighting those battles. So we want to balance the need for growth, the need for protecting our environment, and recognizing the common sense values of our farmers that are already trying to protect our groundwater in eastern Arkansas and the level of the aquifer, that are trying to utilize surface water to a greater extent, utilizing conservation methods, whether it's in poultry farming or whether it is in row crop agriculture. I applaud you for what you're doing. I'm delighted and honored to be your governor. It is great to be here. I can't think of a better birthday present than to be here with the Farm Bureau today. Thank you. God bless you.